Well, I am super excited to be here tonight, mostly because it's the most time I've gotten to spend with my dear friend Jessica Herrin in a while, busiest woman in show business. And so we're just going to be talking about all kinds of stuff. We're going to talk about Stella Dot, the wisdom she brings in Find Your Extraordinary, and just kind of going back to entrepreneurship in general. And then about a half an hour in, we'll open it up, and you guys can ask her any question you want. All right. So Jess. Okay, so first of all, you guys need to know there are very few people, maybe no people other than Jessica, that I would claim are superhuman. But I worked with this woman, and I basically was with you 24/7 for about 3 years, and I would say you're the only one that fits that bill for me. And as I read this book, this woman, you have to know, she doesn't just talk the talk, she walks the walk. And everything in here, you would, if I were you, I'd be reading it saying impossible, but it's all true. So I'm gonna just dig in a little deeper. And I first want to start off with you/us dropping out of business school. We were at Stanford, we had an opportunity, Kleiner Perkins had agreed to back our startup. And when I read about it in the media or I hear about it, it sounds like a really big deal. My memory of it is that we basically were at lunch and we said to the other, so would you drop out if Kleiner agrees to back our startup? And the other one said, yeah, would you? Yeah, pass the rolls. I mean, that's my memory of it. And so my question to you is that your memory of it? Was it a hard decision for you?
We were at Max's Opera House Cafe in the Stanford Shopping Center. That's right. And I think that it was a very easy decision at the time because there is, and it's something I do talk about in the book, and I think that we've lived. We co-founded the company that became weddingchannel.com. So full disclosure, this is my first business partner. That was back in 1998. And there was the first wave of a huge dot-com boom, which also makes me think about how fortunate I was to be an entrepreneur at that moment in time. I think especially this is Women Entrepreneurs Month, and you will be, as a female entrepreneur seeking funding, you will be inundated with all these abysmal statistics. But if you flip that on its head and say, hold on, women have been playing more than a menial role in the workforce for maybe the last 50 years, and actually we've been around for our ancestors 2 million, our modern form 200,000. The last century we've had 2 world wars, the Korea War, the Vietnam War. We just entered the workforce, and I get born now and go to college in the heart of Silicon Valley when women are earning degrees in equal numbers. And we really won the lottery of place and time. And when we had gone back to business school, we both worked in enterprise software before returning to business school. And I didn't go there because I wanted a pedigree. I went there because I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I wanted to have the time to reflect, which business school affords you, and the connections and somewhat of the credibility. And it felt like going to the epicenter of the entrepreneurial spirit. So that's what I was doing there in the first place. And so when I saw the ability to start a company before graduation, I didn't see it as risky, I saw it as efficient.
Well said. And, I don't know if it's in your book or if it's something else I've watched you say, but you talk about not only reaching to your older self to give you wisdom, but looking back to your younger self to give you wisdom. And so do you think that's one of those things where your younger self knew, like, why the hell not? It's here and it's now, and maybe your 40-something-year-old self would tell you that's
First
risky?
of all, I'm 29. I don't know what I meant. But it's funny because we used to be described as young entrepreneurs, and somewhere along the line, that modifier got dropped, which actually is great because you get so much wisdom. And I think that's, as an entrepreneur, Jenny was just asking me, could you go back in time and actually have read that wisdom and applied it as a first-time entrepreneur, or even in the early days of being a second-time entrepreneur? And I do think the answer to that is yes, because time and wisdom, when you're an entrepreneur, you just keep climbing over walls. Wall after wall after wall, but ultimately wisdom allows you still have to brute force, you still have to have a tremendous amount of effort, but with wisdom you step back and say, wait a minute, should I look for a window and door before I just, hurl myself over yet another obstacle in this business path, or should I look for somebody to give me a boost, so I think you just become wiser about how you approach your problems, but I think now I'm remembering what your original question was, when I became...
Do you think that is wisdom that your younger self has when you talk about, because I think that's really wise when you talk about not just looking to your future self for wisdom, but your younger self for wisdom.
Well, let's give it a try, because I think it's so critical. Everybody asks, well, what would you tell yourself at 20? And I think it's far more relevant to ask yourself, what would the 4-year-old version of you tell you now? And because do you have a picture of yourself at 4 that's permanently placed in your parents' home? And for me, again, it was like there was a fake pasture and fence in the background. Olin Mills photography, like just what is that picture of you when you were 4 or 5? And if you were to look at that person and describe the look on their face, what words come up for you? Tell me, what would you say? How would you describe that person? Happy, stoked, careless, free, imaginative. What else? Full of wonder. Curiosity, right, is a huge hallmark of who we are as individuals, animals. And what else? Like relatively fearless, right? Do you think that person went through the day thinking about what would you tell them was possible? Anything. And I think that is what your younger self wants you to know today. You're still that person. Anything is still possible if you believe it is. And so I think that you have to make sure that your experience doesn't rob you of your optimism and your undying belief that anything is possible. Because being an entrepreneur, it takes a lot of resilience, a lot of persistence, and you will give up if you ever believe that it's something, things are too daunted or you're too tired to try or you rule that out. If you eliminate the option to quit because you believe success is inevitable, then you got to go get back to it and start figuring out the solution.
Well, that's a perfect segue into what I want to talk to you about, because one of the things that I knew, even back then, before I read the book, that you had more than any other person I'd ever had the honor of working with or known, are two great traits, I think, to be a fantastic entrepreneur. So one is that struggle is part of the process. And so I want to talk about that one. And then the other one is faith, right? You have to have it in whatever you're working on. So let's talk a little bit about struggle as part of the process. You never expected it to be easy. And I'll just sort of juxtaposition that to my attitude, which is I did expect everything to be easy. We were having a drink beforehand, and I reminded Jessica of a story. We had bought our refurbished computers at Dell, and they came in the box, and we took them out of the box, and I plugged mine in. I was like, mine doesn't work. And Jessica's like, have you read the manual? Like, have you tinkered with it for hours? Because that's, like, you can't expect it to, like, plug in and work. And that was her attitude, and now it's my attitude, but at the time it was not. I did expect to plug it in and have it work. And so that idea that struggle is a part of the process, is that something you feel like you were born with, you learned? Is that a trait that everyone needs to learn?
Well, I think, especially if you're an entrepreneur, I can assure you struggle will be part of your process. So I think that people in this room, inherently know that if you're in the midst of the struggle, and it never really ends, right? I used to joke that if I would write a book about entrepreneurship, it would be in the Dr. Seuss style, and it would just be problems here, problems there, problems everywhere, because no matter how, today my problems are different. Our business is over $300 million in revenue. It's in 6 countries. There's over 60,000 independent business owners. And I have problems every single day, just like I had problems every single day when we were a startup. But that's how you're creating value. That's how you're solving the problems. I mean, you have to find the fun in it and the adventure and see the struggle as a puzzle and learn to see, and really train your mind to see the opportunity instead of the obstacle. But the process of writing a book was very interesting. I mean, the process of starting a company is very interesting, but I found that in writing Find Your Extraordinary, where it really was a guide to help people do more than start a business, but to actually start a life, because that was what I did not realize when we started our first business, is that you don't start a business, you start a life. And then you can create commercial success and look at it and say, oh, wait a minute, I'm not soulfully connected to what I do. Is this true success? Or do I need to say, what's my calling? How do I define happiness as success? And then build a business that's integrated with the life that you want to live. But when I looked at that, describing that process and going through that and really thinking about the struggle, you soul search and you think about, can these traits be developed? Well, I wouldn't have written the book if I didn't believe that each of us do contain the core traits of an entrepreneur and that you can actually hone them. And it starts with a sense of self-confidence, the belief that success is for you, not just for somebody else, and that you are the one. Then it goes through the 6 P's of the entrepreneurial spirit, which is passion, right? Otherwise, what's the point? You've got it. It's too hard not to love what you're doing it for. It's path, so that's the plan that makes passion real. People who make it all worthwhile and help make it real. The perseverance, because it's a lot harder. We all want to believe it's upward to the right, but it's not. It looks like an Etch-a-Sketch, was in a 4-year-old, went to work. It's not this straight and easy path. And then positive mind, so you see the opportunity, and then productivity, so that you can do it with loving your life. But when I think about, so I ask myself, is this just innate? Are you born with this, or can you develop it? I think that there's a lot that of perspective that I've gotten along the way from growing up in and reaching this point of where we met at Stanford Business School in a very unconventional way. You know, I grew up with a mother who suffers from mental illness, so that made for a very interesting childhood. I was raised mostly by a single dad, and when I went to school, when I went to go to college, I probably would have been voted least likely to succeed because I was too busy being a moody teen and reacting to my mother's bad choices than I was focusing on studying. So I ended up going to community college, which is sort of what we could afford at the time and what made the most sense. And I remember being in that place thinking, you know what, I'm going to have to come from behind, but boy, am I going to bring it and come from behind. And I remember I turned it around, I cracked it down, I was working, multiple jobs, and I was getting straight A's, and I was so proud and so excited, and I went to the guidance counselor's office and said, okay, I'm ready to apply to Stanford. I want that they have the best economics school. That's what I want to do. That's where I'm going. And she just laughed in my face and said, people like you don't go there. No one from here goes there. And I'm like, no. I have straight. She's like, do you know how many people with straight A's don't get in? Like, you're not getting in. Like, I'm not getting the application because, by the way, they never didn't have a website. That was so long ago. It wasn't like you just applied. So I needed her to give me the address to mail away and get it. And she's like, just laughed in my face. And I remember that moment recognizing that I had to be my own greatest source of strength. That I wasn't going to doubt her. I wasn't going to doubt myself. I was going to doubt her. And that when she said, no way, I'm like, listen, lady, if you have such disdain for the students here, you should get a different job because I don't want my tax dollars going to your salary, which I loved because I was a waitress and I think I paid $3 in tax. But I didn't want my 1/1000th of a penny going her way. And I'm not funding your bad attitude. And I did apply and I did get in. And so I just think of all the times in which every odds and every obstacle was against me. I've learned to see that my own will and my own belief beyond reason in myself has been more relevant than the probability. And so that has been what has been my undying compass. And I actually because self-confidence is so critical. As an entrepreneur, there's so many times you think, should I give up? Am I crazy? Should I give up? Am I crazy? Is this ever going to work? And you just have to eliminate the option to quit, to completely believe that success is inevitable. And you have to know you're the one.
Right. And that is one of the things I talked about, and I got to see it early on, and I've seen it throughout Stella Dot, is that you always had faith. And I think that's part of the reason why you could keep on with you just saw all the bumps in the road were just bumps in the road for you. You knew exactly where you were headed and that you were going to get there. It was just a matter of, is it going to happen the easy way or the hard way? And I think that's not something every entrepreneur is born with. And so that's another thing that I'm not sure if you can instill into yourself or not, but if you can, I take a hearty dose of Jessica Herrin, because if you don't have the faith, the bumps in the road make you think that maybe you should abort. If you have faith, the bumps in the road are bumps in the road.
Yeah. And you can make it easier on yourself. And I outline the tactical steps to do that. Yes, you need this dose of self-confidence and inspiration and being connected, but one of the most transformative things I've done, which I describe, is meditation. And I'm so glad we're in Northern California so we can be so touchy-feely about this. And I'm so glad that meditation and positive mindset has moved to the mainstream. But I do it with my executive team. And it is, there's so much, it can be so hard in the early stages of the business where you're working all the time. And I foolishly believed in our early days at Dell & James, which became Wedding Channel, that my way to succeed and show how my grit as an entrepreneur and my commitment to my investors and my obligation to my employees was to work my ass off all the time. And that's how I thought I was going to be successful. The reality is I was depleted and I was a terrible leader and I couldn't see the clear opportunities around me. So since then, I have learned to have a far more rigorous practice of self-care. And when Jenny was asking me, do you really think it's possible to exercise every day? I'm like, yes, I do. Because you need to clear your head. You need to see straight. You need to break away. And you are not going to have your best ideas if you're never rested. So losing that I can tell you, my second business, which I bootstrapped and I intended to grow slower, that thing went from 3 million to 33 to 100 million to over 178 to now over 300. And that happened with me getting 7 hours a night of sleep. And I'm much smarter and better than I was the first time when I worked all the time, chained to my desk, thinking that was the only way.
And I did challenge Jessica before we got here tonight, because not only watching her go through watching us at Wedding Channel, watching you in early days of Stella Dot, and then watching all the entrepreneurs that I fund, is that it feels a little bit like a luxury when to get to the other side, to then have this wisdom or apply this wisdom. And when you are, especially you are a mom of two, right? And you're, making amazing things happen. And the wheels were coming off the bus in early days of Stella Dot in the best of ways, like more demand than you could keep up with. Yeah. And you basically had 10 to 15 jobs. Yeah. And I said, Jessica, you honestly believe, if you had read this book and believed this book, that you could have exercised, slept 7 hours, and meditated? And she said,
yeah. So one, I've always, as Jenny knows this, was we both crack our neck. I have this, I get really a lot of neck pain and hand pain if I don't run 30 minutes a day, if I don't keep so that's a nice self-built-in function for me, is I do need to do that. And I even did that always, but the meditation and the sleep I did not always do. And the idea, you become a fool when you give all your time to work because you don't force yourself to instead rigorously prioritize your activities. You have to leave the right stuff undone in order to identify what is the most critical thing. And I think the most important thing that I learned from our board member, Doug McKenzie, who was at Kleiner and backed our first business and then became a seed investor in Stella Dot when I started that, was we were going to go get funded, and it was an aggregated gift registry where we were really providing the software and the consumer experience to bring together retailers' gift registry sites online. And the 800-pound gorilla in the space was Macy's. And we would go into our board meetings and we had a seed capital, but we didn't get the second tranche of it unless we signed this deal. So there's so much to do in a startup, right? You've got to worry about the brand, building the technology, doing other sales pitches, hiring people, finding office space. I mean, there's just really a list of 100 things to do. And so we would go in and we'd say, we signed up Crate and Barrel and we signed up Williams-Sonoma and we built this prototype and we've hired this person. He's like, that's great. Did you sign up Macy's? We're like, no, but we've done this. And so we'd come back the next week and we'd have done A, B, and C. He's like, that's great. Did you sign up Macy's? And you have to figure out what signing up Macy's is in your business. And then you have to keep asking yourself every day, yeah, that's great, but did you sign up Macy's? Because there's not that many things that are going to be the linchpin. There's actually a very few set of things. And if you think you have an endless amount of time to give to your work, what you allow yourself to do is go work on all the other stuff. Instead of saying, like a laser, am I on that most important task? And so now I just operate that way all the time. I always ask myself that metaphorical question, did I sign up Macy's? And I obviously have an analogy to what that really is in my different brands and businesses, and what that is changes over time. But my rigorous thing, like, I'm going home to have dinner with my kids. Like, tonight, I'm gonna go tuck them in. It's because that's my joy in life. So I'm still gonna do what I need to do, but you gotta focus.
And just to add on to that story, I totally remember showing Doug McKenzie our new logo. And he's like, I don't give a fuck about your logo. And I'm pretty sure that's a verbatim. And we're like, I get it.
I see what you're saying.
I'm going to go sign
up
Macy's.
That's a good point. And here's the other thing that goes back to this. In the end, we didn't sign up Macy's, but we got the second round of capital anyway. Because he didn't need, in the end, to see a business. He didn't need the deal. It was supposed to be that the second round was contingent on that contract. At the last minute, it fell through. And we went in there for the fight of our life, and the reality was he needed entrepreneurs that knew that they could build a business without it. He didn't actually need that contract.
And can I tell some color to that story? It's in the book, but it's one of those memories that I have that I remember where I was sitting, where you were sitting, and once again, in total awe of you. But you have Kleiner Perkins basically saying, hey, we're not sure we're gonna give you this second tranche. That was based on Macy's, and now they're not so sure they're gonna work with you.
And we were 24-year-old females at the time.
Exactly.
We're still females, but we're not 24.
We hadn't discussed it before. We didn't know what was happening. And Jessica basically looked at these men and she said, listen, there are going to be bumps in the road for this whole journey. And we want a partner who's not going to freak out every time something doesn't go right. So you're either that partner or we're getting out of here and we're going to go find us that partner. And I was like, yeah, what she said. That's my partner. And so, I mean, I mean, you've always been confident, right? But the confidence that you had that day to make that statement, you didn't say, can I talk to my partner outside or anything? You knew that I'd be with you, and you knew that was the right thing to do. Like, how do you, I mean, as you write this book, you talk a lot about confidence. Like, how do you give wisdom about confidence? Where does it come from?
Well, it's one of the reasons why I try to turn the narrative of the conversation about entrepreneurship and female entrepreneurship on its head a bit, because I don't want hearing those depressing stats to rob you of your confidence. Because again, if you go in there like you know you're there to win and you just assume the world is awaiting your success, you have a far more greater chance of having that be true. And I just think it's perspective. I really do feel the way that I was raised helped that. My dad, who I talk a lot about in the book, who really is my greatest mentor, in life and business, because he was, he grew up with my grandmother, who was educated to the 4th grade in Italy. She, was basically barely got back. She was born in the U.S., but had to go back to Italy with her father, who was a coal miner in Pennsylvania, when her mother died and her sibling died within, a month of each other. So she spent her whole life as the nanny, didn't have a lot of education, gets back to America, spent 8 years paying back her passage, working in a factory. Finally gets married. Her husband dies, leaves her with a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. She can barely speak the language. She's, she came back in the midst of a banking crisis and tons of unemployment. And then there's my father, who's the man of the house at 3. And he had a paper route when he was in the 4th grade to help put food on the table. And I can tell you, this man never complained. All he talks about with his childhood was how lucky he was to have this home-baked bread that she would make that was amazing. Of course, she's making this because she's getting the cheapest thing that she could produce from flour. But he thought it was fantastic. And he remembers the nuns at his school always saying how proud they were of him because his handmade clothes were so pressed. In his head, he was never a victim. He never didn't have, and he never thought, and this is, I think, what he taught me, is that you don't need other people to anoint you ready or worthy. He's now got his master's degree in engineering, ultimately, but he didn't even think he would go to college because he thought he had to support his mother and his brother, and he would just keep working at the grocery store. And then when he realized he might not graduate because he wasn't doing well in trig, and they said, well, wait till you try calculus, it's much harder. He's like, well, I don't want to go tell my mother that I'm not going to be the first person in our family to graduate high school. So he just went to the library, got some books out, and taught himself, caught up on trig, and then taught himself calculus. And according to him, he could have done it better than the professor, the teacher. And then he just kept going. And he just taught himself how to build home, and he taught himself how to code software. And so growing up in our house, there was always manuals on every table. And his whole thing was he never coddled me, never was impressed with anything. And he'd be like, crack a book. Just go crack a book. Like, what's the problem? So for him, not knowing something or not having resources was never a reason why you shouldn't go do that or why you couldn't do that. And so I do have that perspective in life where, I do think it was like, so what? So you don't know? That's normal. Just go learn it. Go figure it out. What's the big deal? And I think that's why I've been able to start businesses, and technology to the wedding space, to jewelry, to skincare, to going to different countries. Because I'm like, well, I'll just go figure it out. How hard can it be?
And the last thing before we open up for Q&A is that I feel that when we were entrepreneurs a long time ago, and then you did it again with Stella Dot, that it felt different than it feels to me here in the Valley in the last couple of years. And I feel like a lot has to do with that the media really has glamorized it. There's poster children. There were the unicorns for a while. Luckily, those have come down. But we were discussing over drinks that it's the furthest thing from glamorous. So I guess I would just say, can you add a little color to how far it is from being a glamorous life? Now it looks glamorous because she's wildly successful and out of that sort of early stage.
I always say overnight success stories take 7 to 10 years. I went 6 years without a paycheck in my business. We sold Wedding Channel, so I sort of thought of that as let's double down. And that was my reason for justifying, okay, I'm not going to earn an annual income, and around here it's really expensive, but I'm going to just put every penny into investing in myself and hopefully creating a life that I love and a business with a mission that I believe in. And it was, I think that when people ask me how hard something is or how this, it's just the way my mind works, where I can't even process that thought. I just think, what an adventure, what joy, what a gift, what an opportunity. And
it's
I know
like
that sounds like, yes, exactly. And now look, I have the loves of my life. Wasn't that worth it? Who cares? Why focus on the pain? And I do think that's my general attitude. And I'm not making this up to be sunshiny. It's actually just ripping off the filter on my thoughts. That's actually what's going on in my head, which is this is tough, but we can do it. And I am a very focused person who, in some ways you could say, is obsessive. And I don't need a wide variety of activities. I eat the same breakfast and lunch every day. I'm very disciplined. I'm very rote because I have this, I will go in on a problem and just stay there like a laser. So that's not for everybody, but it suits me. And so solving that really hard business problem, around having a family and all these other things was a joy. It's what I love to do.
I will tell you though that I do think there's a sort of it's sort of like childbirth. You forget, or the early stages. You forget the sleepless nights. I remember at one point, once again, crazy success starts hitting Stella Dot. You're doing 10 people's job, maybe 20, and you told me a story about coming home from a big day at work, and you left the plate in the sink, and your husband Chad's like, "Really, you can't put it in the dishwasher?" And you're like, "Really?" That's where I am.
I'm done.
Like, I am officially out, and I cannot put that plate in that dishwasher.
Yeah, I'll come home some days and I'm like, I'm so fried. It's quitting time.
Yeah,
it's quitting
exactly.
time.
I'm clocking
I'm
out.
off duty. I will do absolutely no other tasks today. The thing about what I've also realized, this is again the gift of wisdom and time and being a serial entrepreneur, is that you're never going. And I remember a board member said this to me earlier. It's like I'm like, if I could just get this one person hired, then this would work out, and then this way. It's like you'll always be one hire away. You do know that, right? And that is the thing, is that you actually are always, there's always this problem, always one way. So at some point, you just have to say, when do I then walk out the door and go enjoy dinner? Or when is enough? Because there will just be more problems to solve later. And I'm now, decades into being an entrepreneur, and I'm still one hire away, still one problem away.
And so before we move it off to Q&A, I just have to ask you, like, you talk about I can do anything, I can't do, but none of us can do everything, right?
Right.
And so I look at you, and I know for a fact you are a very successful CEO of an incredible company, an amazing mom, an amazing wife, an amazing friend, and you exercise, and you look fabulous, and you remodeled a house from the studs. She could have bought a house, right? No, they picked every last tile, every last knob. And then I see, I think it was on social media, she got a dog. And I was like, no way, how could she have a dog?
That was a huge
and
mistake.
now you decide.
That last part.
But now you decide to write a book, right? Like, I get it, you have wisdom to share, but like, why?
I was so naive. I honestly thought that a ghostwriter wrote the book. I mean, it seems like in the title that highly suggests that somebody else would write this book. And I thought they would just sort of watch some videos and then out would come a book. And so that's why I agreed to it. I say that actually only half in jest. I had no idea how much effort it would actually take. And also, it's very, putting your smug mug on the cover and writing a book feels like running down the street naked. It's a lot of me, and, so there was a lot of reasons why I didn't want to do it. But at the same time, I step back, and I've been so heads down building a business that sometimes you forget to look around the world. And frankly, living here in Silicon Valley, you think of companies and company size, and, and then I was, at this women's group. I'm a member of YPO, which has been phenomenally helpful for me in professional development. But there was the female equivalent of that is called WPO, and I spoke at their conference, and they kept telling me, like, oh, well, you're going to meet the platinum members, and the platinum members, and it was this big build-up to the platinum members. And I kept thinking to myself, this is very exciting. I wonder who they are. I wonder what their businesses are. This is great. I'm like, well, tell me more about the platinum members. So they're like, well, their businesses are over $5 million in revenue. And I was like, oh. I thought you were going to say 100, and there was only there was so few of them, and so it's one of those moments like, oh, I forgot for a minute there because I was so busy just getting my kids dinner or doing the business, or that I forgot that there's still this massive problem out there where not just, and I always have this gender neutral view of the world, but not just women, but entrepreneurs in general are out there trying to do something incredibly courageous and hard, and they're the innovators and the job creators. And so if I can amortize my pain, if I can take the lessons learned and try to wrap it up and give it to somebody else so that in their moment of doubt or in the need to have a framework that they can get a little hit, I think that was worth the nights and weekends for quite some time.
Well, I give you job well done. I devoured this book. I got to live this wisdom years before you guys, before she put a pen to paper. It's mandatory reading in the Jacoby household. And so, but with that, what I would love to do is open it up to Q&A.
Thank you so much.